Well, we continue with our study of the Apostle Paul's letter to the Galatians this morning. In chapter 4, verses 21 through 31. In your pew Bible, it's on page 947, and I'm reading actually from the New International Version. Tell me, you who desire to be subject to the law, will you not listen to the law? For it is written that Abraham had two sons, one by a slave woman and the other by a free woman. One, the child of the slave, was born according to the flesh. The other, the child of the free woman, was born through the promise. Now this is an allegory. These women are two covenants. One woman, in fact, is Hagar from Mount Sinai, bearing children for slavery. Now Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia and corresponds to the present Jerusalem, for she is in slavery with her children. But the other woman corresponds to the Jerusalem above. She is free, and she is our mother. For it is written, Rejoice, you childless one, you who bear no children. Burst into song and shout, you who endure no birth pangs. For the children of the desolate woman are more numerous than the children of the one who is married. Now you, my friends, are children of the promise, like Isaac. But just as at that time the child who was born according to the flesh persecuted the child who was born according to the Spirit, so it is now also. But what does the Scripture say? Drive out the slave and her child, for the child of the slave will not share the inheritance with the child of the free woman. So then, friends, we are children not of the slave, but of the free woman. This is in 1,000 years from now. Chapter 1. There once was a kingdom founded on a promise. Now this kingdom sat on top of a mountain overlooking a long, blue and shimmering lake. When the king stood in the palace tower, he could see from the northern end of the lake all the way to the southern end, where it emptied into a rushing stream that quickly disappeared into a forest of pointed firs. I will surely bless you, God said to the king, and God was true to his word. On the mountain slopes below the kingdom's walls, the king and the good citizen planted terraces of gardens. Every vegetable grew there, even some vegetables no one had ever heard of. Carams, a deep orangey kind of yam, and potamos, a kind of potato that grew on a plant above the ground. There were apple trees, peach and pear trees, cherry trees too, coffee trees, their branches drooping with the finest coffee beans grown anywhere. On the slopes below the gardens and orchards, 1,000 cattle grazed, or more. Sheep, no one had ever bothered to count them, rested in the lush green grass. And geese and ducks and chickens quacked and clucked about, pecking at the ground. No one had seen a tick in years. The kingdom's health department had declared Lyme disease a thing of the past. Children played in the fields while their mothers tended the gardens, and the fathers watched over the herds and the flocks. Every day the king walked through the kingdom. There was a royal guard, but no need for one, for the king was well respected and loved. He would stop in the street and talk to people, even knocking on their doors and inviting himself in for a coffee, and perhaps even if they asked him something for his sweet tooth. "Oh, no," he would say at first. "I don't want to bother you. And I should wash my figure," he would say, tapping his tummy. "Oh, well," he would then say, "if you insist. Sure, I'd love a slice of warm peach pie." And then he would move on, passing through the kingdom's gates to inspect the gardens and the fields, pausing to catch a red rubber ball, an errant throw from one of the children, and toss it back with a high, hearty laugh. Ha ha! He might jump into the middle of a game of double dutch and then bow out when his feet got tangled in the ropes and almost topple him to the ground. He always had an encouraging word for the children and the citizens. The kingdom's sidewalks were lined with bricks of gold, precious stones, rubies, emeralds, sapphires, adorned the lampposts and the water fountains. When the fountains were lit at night and the lampposts turned on, the gems sparkled and dazzled the eyes. The kingdom was surrounded by a wall 18 feet high. There was a massive gate that looked out on the lake, but it was never closed. None of the kingdom's gates were ever closed. There was no need, for peace reigned throughout the kingdom and far beyond. There wasn't even a need for laws, for everyone did what was right. The king was faithful, man of God, and God said to the king, "Yes, surely I will bless you and your ancestors after you." Chapter 2. Then one day the king summoned his privy counselor, chancellor, and chamberlain to his bedside. As they entered the royal chambers, the royal physician was standing next to the king's bed. "My royal physician tells me I am dying," he announced. "I am going to appoint my 2 sons, the princes, as vice-regents of the kingdom." His privy counselor asked, "There will be no king, your majesty? Or are you saying there will be 2 kings?" asked his chancellor. "2 kings!" exclaimed his chamberlain. "The princes will be vice-regents, sharing oversight of the kingdom," the king clarified. The king's privy counselor, chancellor, and chamberlain huddled and spoke quietly, although animatedly, among themselves. "Here there," the king said. "What are you talking about?" "Your majesty, if we may," said his privy counselor. "If the king doesn't think us too forthright," said his chancellor. The king's younger son, Prince Appengelo, displays the wonderful qualities of leadership. He's compassionate and cares for the people. He's humble and kind. Though he could never fill your shoes, your majesty, he would make an excellent king to follow in your footsteps. The king remained silent for a moment. Then he said, "And my older son, Prince Namas, could not?" There was a strange, long moment of silence. And then the king said, "You were right, of course. My wife told me as much before she died." Prince Namas was 14 years older than Prince Appengelo. He was tall, strong, and handsome, a fierce warrior without any battles to fight. "Nevertheless," the king said, "he is my son. I am going to appoint him head of the royal guard and security for the kingdom." "But your majesty," his privy counselor, chancellor, and chamberlain objected, but the king held up his hand for them to stop. "Prince Appengelo will be put in charge of the affairs of state and the welfare of the people." So Namas and Appengelo were called to the king's bedside. "I am dying, my sons," he said. "I am appointing you vice-regents of the kingdom. Prince Namas, you will be in charge of the royal guard and security. Prince Appengelo, you will be head of affairs of state. Now come closer. No one has ever seen this." And the king took a scroll out from under the bed covers. "Why, this is a code of laws," Prince Appengelo exclaimed as he unrolled the scroll. "A code of laws," said Prince Namas. "Yes," the king said, "they have never been needed, but the day may come that they will be. Be careful not to enact them until absolutely necessary. Persevere, be patient, hold on to the promise. But if you have to fall back on the law, always remember the promise. Never let go of it." Chapter 3. One day, not long after the king died, the wind blew strong out of the north and swept down the lake and up the slope of the mountain. The people cried out, "All the crops will be destroyed." Another said, "The animals are all exposed." Prince Appengelo quickly organized the citizens into small teams. One team went out and picked the corn. Another went out and picked the beans, and so on. Other teams picked the fruit that was ripe, while another group brought the cattle in, and another gathered in the sheep. The children chased in the ducks and chickens, and behind them the geese chased the children into the walls. Prince Appengello lent a hand while Prince Namas stood by and gave orders. Once everyone was inside the walls, Prince Namas ordered the gates to be closed. They clanged shut like a resounding cymbal. No one could ever remember when they had last been shut. Prince Appengello stood in the courtyard and encouraged the people, "Be strong and courageous. Have faith and remember the promise." And the people all said, "We will do everything Prince Appengello says." And Prince Namas, who was standing nearby, turned away and grumbled to himself. For days the wind blew and the sky remained gray and leathery, like the sagging belly of a hippopotamus. Whitecaps jumped and dipped as they slid across the lake. Finally, the wind stopped blowing and the sun came out. Yet it still didn't rain. It didn't rain for weeks. The lakeshore started to recede. The stream at the end of the lake turned into a trickle. Wells started to dry up in the kingdom. Prince Appengello organized a bucket brigade to bring water from the lake up the mountain slope to fill the kingdom's wells. The people are beginning to grumble. The privy councillor, chancellor, and chamberlain informed Prince Namas and Prince Appengello. Storehouses are running low. The cattle herd is thinning, and the sheepfold is growing smaller. The people are saying the princes aren't capable. They are saying they want a king. "Give us a king like other kingdoms have," they are saying. "We must impose the law now," said Prince Namas. "We must have faith in the promise," said Prince Appengello. The privy council, chancellor, and chamberlain all asked, "What is this about a law?" And so the princes showed them the scroll of the law. And after they examined it, they surprised even themselves by agreeing with Prince Namas. "We agree. You must impose the law before it is too late and chaos rules the kingdom." Reluctantly, Prince Appengello agreed. So the chamberlain went throughout the kingdom, reading the royal announcement. "Hear ye, hear ye. The law is now imposed, and a curfew has been set. Everyone must get off the streets by 8 p.m. Meanwhile, the royal guard went around, hanging up signs throughout the kingdom. "No more spitting. All violators will be prosecuted." The citizens stopped and looked and listened. "But we never needed a law when your father was king." And another said, "No spitting. We have never seen anyone spit in the streets or on the sidewalks." And just then, a 7-year-old walked up and spit on the ground right in front of a sign. "We need a king," the citizens said. Prince Namas said, "Not a king, but a code to live by." And Prince Appengello, standing in the palace tower, turned to the privy councillor and chancellor and said, "We can't live by a code. We must live by faith in the promise." Chapter 4. Soon, men and women were spitting everywhere there was a sign. The royal guard built a stockade, and anyone caught spitting was put in them for an hour. Still, they continued to spit, and night after night, they violated the curfew. Prince Namas imposed a law that they couldn't congregate in numbers of 3 or more. Then he outlawed singing, and when the people started to whistle, he outlawed whistling. "What shall we do?" Prince Namas, the privy council, chancellor, and chamberlain wondered. "I will speak to the people," Prince Appengello said. But they cautioned him against it. They may not be as cooperative as they once were. Yet Appengello went out, and Prince Namas set the royal guard to follow him at a distance. "Good citizens," Prince Appengello said, Times are difficult, but we must be strong and courageous. As a people of the promise, we will face difficult times, but we must be faithful and hold on to the promise. But we can't eat or drink a promise, the people objected. So Prince Appengello once again described the promise to them. Once more, the kingdom will prosper, even more than before. It will spread out along the entire ridge of the mountain, from one end of the long, blue and shimmering lake to the other. Instead of the sidewalks being paved with gold, the streets will be lined with it. The walls will be made of jasper and decorated with precious stones. And there will be no more need for lampposts, because the glory of the Lord will shine all the time. And the people said, though this time with much less enthusiasm, we will do whatever Prince Appengello says. And Prince Naumas, looking on from a distance, turned away and grumbled to himself. We must pull up the gold bricks that line the sidewalks and take down the rubies, emeralds, and sapphires from the lampposts and fountains, and we must trade them in for food and provisions, declared Prince Naumas. And the privy councillor, chancellor, chamberlain, surprised themselves once again by agreeing with Prince Naumas, and even Prince Appengello surprised himself by agreeing as well. So Prince Appengello once again organized the citizens into teams. They started pulling up the gold bricks from the sidewalks and taking down the rubies, emeralds, and sapphires from the lampposts and fountains. They appointed the privy councillor an ambassador to lead a contingent of royal guards to take the gold and gems south of the kingdom, to find another place where they could trade them in for food and provisions. They were gone a week, 2 weeks, a month. The citizens started to grumble. Something's gone wrong, they said. Another said, of course it has. They've taken the gold and gems and gone off on their own way. We must send more royal guards after them and bring them back, proclaimed Prince Naumas. Have faith, brother, Appengello said. Be patient. But the very next day, a vast army appeared on the horizon, just south of the lake. Quickly, they marched up the slopes of the mountain and surrounded the kingdom walls. They broke down the gates with battering rams. They invaded the palace. They took all the golden goblets and the silverware. They even took the last of the golden bricks and gathered the remaining gems. They invaded the citizens' homes. And they even took the last of the white, fluffy sheep. And when they left, they carried away with them Prince Naumas and Prince Appengello, and the privy councillor, and the chancellor, and the chamberlain, and all their families, and most of the citizens. And they brought them to a distant land where they were already holding the privy councillor and the royal guards. Chapter 5. The king of the distant land addressed Prince Naumas and Prince Appengello and all the people who had been brought with them. You are being held here under house arrest. You will never be allowed to leave the kingdom gates. But when you are inside, you are free to go anywhere you wish. Learn our language. Socialize with everyone. Marry. Build houses here. Make a life for yourself among us. One thing you must never do: speak about the promise. The people here dressed differently. They ate spicier foods, and they drank way too many fermented drinks. They spread freely wherever they wanted without any feelings of guilt, and they stayed up way past midnight, but still got up in the morning and went to work. Prince Naumas blended in well. No more would he wait for the promise. Now he would make the promise come true. He desired to court the king's daughter. The king, seeing that he was strong and skilled, a fierce warrior without a battle to fight, encouraged his daughter to court him. Soon there was a royal wedding. Nomus was a prince again, and his wife, the king's daughter, gave birth to many sons, heirs to the kingdom. And Prince Nomus made fun of Prince Appengello for holding on to the promise. Prince Appengello himself married, but a woman who had been brought with them from the old kingdom. Prince Nomus, though, made fun of his wife. Your wife has sleepy eyes, and she still hasn't given you heirs. And day by day, you each are growing older. And Prince Nomus continued to deride Prince Appengello for remaining faithful to the promise. Prince Nomus decided, he found out that Prince Appengello was meeting with people in his home, people from the former kingdom, and that they were rejoicing and proclaiming their faith in the promise. So Nomus had them arrested, and they were all assigned to hard labor. Things may get worse before they get better, Prince Appengello told his wife and the people. And the people said, this time, with resilience, we will do everything Prince Appengello says. And Prince Nomus, who could hear from a distance, turned away and let out a high, hearty laugh. Then one day, there was chaos in the kingdom. People were running from here to there, and from there to here. What is going on? Someone asked. Another said, there's something approaching the kingdom. And on the horizon was a massive cloud of dust rolling toward the kingdom walls. And then out of the cloud came a man riding a great white steed, and an army following him, also riding white steeds, their galloping hooves seemingly not touching the ground. Before anyone knew what was going on, they had captured the kingdom without violence and subdued the king and his guard. Prince Appengello was found and brought to the man on the white steed. He said, come with me, for today the promise is fulfilled. All those who remain faithful to the promise will be returned to the old kingdom. And so the man on the steed and his army started helping people through the gate. And Prince Nomus, with his wife, the king's daughter, and all their children came and got in line. And the man on the steed said, not you. And Prince Nomus said, but I am an heir to the throne, Appengello's older brother. And the man said, true heirs are those who have faith in the promise. And so Nomus and his whole clan were left behind. Conclusion. Prince Appengello and his wife, Faith, the privy councillor, chancellor, and chamberlain, and all their families, and all who had remained faithful to the promise, were brought back to the old kingdom, which had not only been restored, but expanded and enriched. It now stretched along the entire mountain ridge, from one end of the long, blue and shimmering lake to the other. And it was surrounded by a great wall with 12 gates. 3 gates on the east side, 3 on the west, 3 on the north, and 3 on the south, which were never closed. And the wall was made of jasper, and the kingdom streets were paved with gold. And precious stones were so common, they were just laying around on the ground like rocks. And there was no more moon or sun, because there was no night or day, because the glory of the Lord shone forever. Welcome to the kingdom of no more, the man on the steed said. No more barrenness, no more persecution, no more conflict, no more tears, no more pain, no more sorrow, no more death. And Prince Appengello and his wife Faith had many sons and daughters and lived happily thereafter forever. In 1,000 years from now, will our ancestors, our spiritual ancestors, still be faithful to the promise? In 100 years from now, or even 10, or 1 year, will our congregation be faithful to the gospel of grace? Will we still worship and live by faith in the promised one who has already come, the Lord Jesus Christ? Amen.